You've led Milbank through some billion-dollar plus deals.
Money was a little tight growing up. I'm one of the 7 people who run a firm that has $2 billion in revenue. That's not a business to run. How big is your business?
Did they teach you that in law school?
None of it. You need to set priorities and you need to grind. When I slept in the office on one of our anniversaries, she understood. And when we got married, I didn't come home for 2 more days because I had to work. She understood.
Should people follow their passion?
No. If I followed my passion, I'd be unemployed and homeless. One of the biggest mistakes I see young people in the workforce do is...
Guys, I guarantee you would not expect a real estate lawyer to have a story this good. Erwin Dweck isn't just any lawyer, though. He's a partner at Milbank, one of the top law firms in the world, where he not only leads the real estate practice, but he also helps run the entire business as a member of Milbank's Global Executive Committee. That's a $2 billion operation with 1,000 lawyers and 2,000 employees. And in this episode, Erwin breaks down how he helped PIMCO take a $3.9 billion REIT private, how he became the go-to guy for distressed real estate during the 2008 crisis, and how a risky move from a stable job at an established law firm led to everything taking off. We talk about what it's really like to be an Orthodox Jew in big law, unplugging every Shabbat, missing key moments with family, and how he balances it all. He also shares his thoughts on whether you should follow your passion, why work-life balance is the wrong goal, and the one quality that instantly tells him whether or not a young professional is going to make it. I'm Victor Bracca, and Momentum is where I dive deep with exceptional leaders to uncover the key decisions, defining moments, and lessons that propel them to success, and how those insights can inspire your journey forward. And whether you're thinking about law, business, entrepreneurship, whatever it might be, or just what it takes to operate at the highest level, you're going to get a ton out of this conversation. Let's get into it. This episode is brought to you by Jeff Sitt and the Eli Cohen Insurance Agency. Erwin Dweck, welcome to Momentum.
Thank you very much. Excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. You're one of the most sought-after lawyers in New York, and there's so much to cover with you in terms of business, in terms of giving back to the community and getting involved. So let's just start at the beginning. Tell me, who is Erwin Dweck?
Who is Erwin Dweck? Erwin Dweck was born in Brooklyn, but very quickly moved to Deal, New Jersey in 1977 as a 1-year-old. Grew up in Deal in an amazing time. The 80s in Deal was a fantastic time. A wonderful, amazing cohort of people. Went to Hillel through 12th grade. Just an amazing group of people throughout elementary school and high school, which I think really contributed to just a wonderful environment. You know, everybody played basketball. Everybody was really intelligent, creative, thoughtful, a wonderful environment.
I saw the final, the championship game, basketball game in your Instagram link.
That's right. So, yeah, and I was part of the 1993 Hillel championship team when I was a backup point guard, and then we went to the finals in 94. We lost in the finals.
All right,
my senior year.
We won't talk about that.
We won't talk about that.
So tell me professionally, what's your role at Milbank? You're a real
Sure.
estate partner, and just tell me a little bit about that.
So at Milbank, I'm a partner in the commercial real estate group. I'm head of the real estate practice. We call practice group leader, so basically in charge of the real estate group. I'm also one of 7 people who are on our executive committee. So think about the people that basically run the firm, the business of the firm. And I'm also, I have a role where I'm head of what we call our billing and collections committee. So I kind of run finances, billing, collections for everybody around the firm.
Awesome.
The firm's, we have probably a little bit over 1,000 lawyers. I think we're in 8 offices around the world. So Asia, Germany, the UK, Brazil, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C. So it's a big operation. And it's a blast. It's a blast to be able to not just practice law, but to actually run the business of a law firm, which is a pretty cool thing.
That's awesome. You've led Milbank through some billion-dollar plus deals, which is unbelievable. One of them being you've led PIMCO into a $3.9 billion take-private REIT. Did I say that correctly? I don't even know.
Yeah, so PIMCO is one of my longtime clients. Been working with them since probably 2010. And they were looking to effectively buy publicly traded office REIT. And so they came to me and said,
And what's a REIT? For those who don't know,
so
myself included.
Okay, so a REIT is a real estate investment trust.
Sure.
It's a tax advantageous structure to hold real estate where you have completely passive income. So an office building is a classic opportunity to hold REIT. It's, again, tax advantageous because it is passed through. You don't really have to pay taxes if. I won't get into the legal detail of it. But there are a bunch of publicly traded REITs, so you can buy and sell them on a stock exchange. And PIMCO wanted to take Columbia Properties Trust private. So they came to me and said, we need to do a couple of things. One, we need to figure out how to actually take the company private. We need to do the M&A piece of it, mergers and acquisitions, which is a full operating company with employees and offices and all that stuff. But also we had to figure out how to finance that acquisition. So you need to borrow money against the assets owned by the REIT to take the entire thing private. So that was a fun one. Unfortunately for PIMCO, the timing of that was a little not a fantastic time to invest in office REITs. But to this day, even as recently as this weekend, I've been working on assets related to that acquisition.
Nice. And that was a $3.9 billion deal.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Did you always know that you wanted to go into law? Like, what did it look like for you in high school, in your early college days? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so for me, look, I come from a family of six kids. It was important for me in high school to make sure that whatever I did, I was able to pay my bills. Money was a little tight growing up, and I looked around at my friends and I sort of said to myself, what I want to make sure is I can always pay my yeshiva tuition bills. I can always pay my expenses. And so for me, particularly when I went to school, so I went to Columbia as an undergrad. I was lucky to get into Columbia, and I started borrowing money immediately. So by the time I graduated college, I had a massive amount of student debt, and the only way to not have to pay back your student debt is to go to law school and to take on more debt.
To push
it off for an additional 3 years.
I was like, I had my ears open. I was like, how do you get your student loans forgiven?
So, and I was, again, lucky after graduating from Columbia to be able to go to Penn Law School in Philadelphia, which, by the way, was my third choice. So I got rejected from both Columbia and NYU for law school, but I was lucky enough to get into Penn. And from there, once you graduate with even more debt, you really have no choice but to go into work and to start paying down the student loans. So for me, being a lawyer was always about making sure that I had the ability to always be able to pay my bills. And from there, it kind of grew and developed, and I'm lucky to get to the place I am now. But that was the mindset. The mindset was, how can I get to a professional job where I wouldn't be, my dad was in retail. My dad had a career change in his mid to late 40s. And I never wanted to have that variability. I never wanted to have that risk. So law seemed like the natural place to go. My older brother became a doctor. I became a lawyer. So that was kind of the thought process.
Nice. And did you have an interest in law from a kid, from a young age, or was it really focused on being able to pay the bills in the very tough economy that you were putting yourself into? I think
like most young kids who fight with their parents or argue, people say, "Oh, you should be a lawyer. You have a great opportunity to fight."
I've been told that many times.
So you should go into law. You should go to law school. But as I began to learn more about the law, what became interesting to me is, as a transactional lawyer, right? You're not somebody who goes to court. You're not somebody who's fighting and arguing. It's quite the opposite. And when I started to learn in law school that what you're really trying to achieve is making deals happen and being a facilitator, being a connector of people, being a deal junkie, it was a lot more enjoyable than the litigation. I want to fight. I want to go to court. And I want to be a guy on TV who stands in front of a judge. It was the exact opposite. And you learn being a lawyer, and you learn in law school that there's really a whole world that's opened up to you. It's not about Law and Order on TV. It's not about whatever suits you see on TV. It's about being able to be a deal guy. It's about being able to make transactions happen, connect people, and for the most part, what's wonderful about being a transactional lawyer is at the end of the day, most people are happy at the end because there's a deal that's getting done. Whereas with litigation, at the end of the day, somebody's happy and somebody's not.
Right. I like that way of looking at it. I mean, a lot of people look at the whole field of law as a zero-sum game, but like what I'm getting from you is that you figure out ways to structure a deal creatively so that all parties can go out happy.
Yeah, as a transactional lawyer, you need to be, first and foremost, an excellent lawyer. So that means excellent technically in the documents. The documents need to read right, they need to work right. But to really take that next step and not just be the guy who's sitting in office or the girl who's sitting in the office working on documents, you need to be able to be a commercial advisor, a trusted advisor to your clients. They need to come to you and say, hey, do you know so-and-so? Can you connect me with that person? Or this is a tough issue. How do we solve that? And the more experience you have and the more commercial minded you can be, the more you can make transactions happen. But the first thing you need to be able to do is be completely and totally technically excellent in documents and as an actual lawyer.
Nice. And tell me about law school a bit. I mean, I think a lot of people, like myself, picture law school in terms of a huge grind, pulling all-nighters to study for your exams. Is that what it looked like for you?
So law school was super easy for me because when I was in college, I had to work 4 jobs to be able to pay my tuition and what was left. And when you get to law school, the first thing they tell you is you're not allowed to work during your 1L year. So I looked around, I said, I have 4 classes and I don't have anything else to do. I said I knew to get a job, I needed to work really, really hard my first semester, get the best grades I possibly could. So for me, I had a singular focus in law school. As I said, I didn't get into Columbia, I didn't get into NYU. It was a blessing to actually be in Philadelphia because I was away from the community, not too far, but away. I was a short drive from Deal. I was an easy train ride away from the city, but I was isolated in a lot of ways. And so that first year, all I did was study and play basketball because that was my extra time in the middle in West Philadelphia. And then maybe on Thursday night or Friday night or Saturday night, I would go out with my friends from law school or some of the friends that were at Penn at the time. We had these great Shabbat meals. Shout out to Mal Saror, who is now one of my closest friends, who was there with me. And that ability to have a singular focus on school for the first time in my life really allowed me to do great things academically my first year.
Nice. And you were able to just focus on school, which is great.
That's all I did, no work, yeah.
Nice. And so school didn't come so difficult to you. And tell me a little bit about what it looked like for you after law school.
The way law school worked back then, it's changed a little bit, is after your 1L year, your first year, you typically had an unpaying job. I got super, super lucky because it happened to be during the dot-com boom where there were a bunch of law firms that didn't fill what they called their summer associate classes.
Sure.
So I was one of, I think, 10 students at Penn, I'm not sure how this happened, to actually get a full-paying job at a large law firm in New York called Proskauer Rose. Very famous for representing the NBA. It was a very cool place to work. And because I had that summer job at a top 25, top 30 firm, it became much easier to get a 2L job. So that's your normal, for a big law, that's your normal path. Your second summer after your second year in law school, you get a job that you ultimately will be your permanent placement sort of after you graduate. Right. So working at Proskauer, I was able to really use that as a stepping stone for my 2L summer, which was at Simpson Thacher, which is a really large, great firm that does great real estate work, great M&A work, and I leveraged that for my first job after law school.
And what did that look like for your first foray into big law?
Amazingly, I started on September 4th, 2001. So you could do the math.
Wow.
One of my closest friends, Michael Rishti, we lived together with his little brother Eddie, who was in NYU Law School, I think, at the time.
And my cousin once or twice or whatever.
There you go. Removed. That's right. And I literally started a week before 9/11. We had just moved into an apartment. I don't think we had cable yet. We barely had a working TV. We certainly didn't have internet. And the first week is all training, getting up to speed and getting excited to go. And then 9/11 happened. And there was virtually no legal work to do for 4 to 6 months in the group that I was in.
Oh, wow. That's a long time.
Yeah, it was a lot. So I actually started in what they called their credit group, which is general bank lending. And right after 9/11, there was no market for that type of lending. And so I was able to very quickly pivot into their real estate group. I think it was about 6 months in. And that's kind of where I landed.
Nice. And how long were you at Simpson for?
I stayed at Simpson till Passover of 2006. I remember exactly that's when it was. And my first tour, couldn't ask for a better place to start your career at Simpson Thacher. I did boatloads of Blackstone work, actually. Blackstone real estate was still in its very infant days. I shouldn't say infant, but we were doing billion-dollar deals in the early 2000s. But I got to 2006 and I looked around and I said, I can stay here, plug in, and continue doing these same deals over and over again for the same client. But I wanted to kind of build my own brand. I wanted to bring in my own clients. I wanted to do more than just a very narrow niche at what I had been doing. And so in 2006, I kind of looked around for other opportunities. And I met this guy who sort of became my rabbi, Kevin O'Shea, who was working at a firm called Allen & Overy, which is one of the largest international firms, 50 offices around the world. Amazing contacts and relationships with Middle Eastern money, Asian money, European money. And Kevin was the only partner in the group at the time. It was a very small group with massive upside, and I was going to be his number two at a relatively young age. So that was a really exciting time, and sometimes you get really lucky. People ask me, how did you make that decision to move to go work with Kevin? And I don't really know, sometimes you get lucky, but made that decision. And from there, Kevin and I built a massive practice together. We've eventually made other partners with us, and we moved in 2016 to Milbank. We were, collectively as a group, we brought the whole team over. And there are a lot of reasons for that, but we can get into if that's interesting.
So interesting. So what I'm wondering is, how does it work? You guys build out a team at a particular law firm, and then you're able to mobilize that team and move to a different firm?
Yeah.
It's sort of like entrepreneurship inside a larger corporate entity. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So we're able to build the brand at A&O, and A&O is a fantastic place, but we almost did it in spite of Allen & Overy, not because of Allen & Overy. And so the relationships we built were very much our own relationships. The law is a relationship business. It's not a transactional business. You build personal relationships with people who you follow throughout your career. The clients you get are on the back of referrals. They're not on the back of the firm sometimes. And so we really built this product. We built a brand. And in 2016, we looked around and said, is Allen & Overy actually the best place for our very strong domestic real estate practice? And Brexit had just happened, and I was being paid in pound sterlings. That didn't help anybody. And Milbank really didn't have a proper real estate practice, but they had an amazingly incredible domestic finance practice. So they were anything you can lend against, they were doing. Aircraft, businesses, you name it, they were doing it. They also had probably the preeminent bankruptcy practice, which fit into what we were doing when it dealt with distressed real estate. And they didn't have anybody there, so they needed a whole team. And so it was a supernatural fit, and that was November of 2016. We took the entire group up in 2 days, and we moved them over.
Oh, wow.
And we were able to, together with Milbank, our practice in the last 8 or 9 years has probably tripled or quadrupled in size.
That's awesome.
It's just been an absolute home run of a move. Yeah.
That's great. I find it so interesting because I'm entrepreneurial, but I do want to go into finance, right? Yeah. So it's sort of like a lot of people see it as conflicting, right? Entrepreneurship and going to a large corporate company with thousands of employees and individualized teams, but the individualized teams aspect of it allows you to be entrepreneurial and to maybe rise the ranks, maybe start your own team at a company like this and build out your own team and hire your own employees and it's entrepreneurial.
I don't think you could be a really successful big firm lawyer if you don't have the entrepreneurial bug. I've seen some excellent lawyers who don't have that gene, and they're fantastic and super useful, but they're not the ones that are leading practices.
Right.
They're not the ones that are saying, hey, this is my longtime client. They need X or whatever it is. They need a connection. They're looking for real estate in San Francisco. Hey, I know somebody who can do it. Or, do you know somebody who can make a really high leveraged or risky loan? Or do you know somebody, I just got a call from somebody that we do work with who said, what, there's a really interesting loan there that I want to buy from somebody. Can you put me in touch with them? And that's entrepreneurial. That's going out there and a little bit of that adrenaline rush when you get that deal, when you land that client that you've been chasing. As a lawyer, you can make a very good career sitting in your office and doing documents, but somebody's got to be the guy out there building it. I'd say the other thing for me, when you talk about entrepreneurial at a big law firm, is there was somebody who once said to me, well, you're a lawyer. You don't run a business. And I said, that's funny. I work at a firm, and I'm one of the 7 people who run a firm that has $2 billion in revenue. That's not a business to run? How big is your business? I have over 2,000 employees and 1,000 lawyers in 8 countries. That's a business. And so when I was lucky enough to get elected to our executive committee, I'm very much entrepreneurial. I'm very much business focused because I need to think about the business of law, not just doing documents. I need to think about, do we pay bonuses? Do we not pay bonuses? Who do we hire laterally? What opportunistically should we be looking at? How do we deal with whatever the issues are in the big law market or the law firm market generally from day to day and week to week, which is not insignificant.
Did they teach you that in law school?
None of it. None of it.
And you learned that all on the job?
It was something I was always drawn to. The business of law, and because I was interested in it, there are a bunch of blogs that talk about it and compensation structures and how these things work. But Kevin actually didn't like it. He was a deal junkie. So when I joined Kevin, his view was, now I have Erwin, you go do all this stuff.
It's a win-win.
It was a win-win. And obviously he had the entrepreneurial bug, but all the management stuff, not so interested in.
Right.
And so from a very young age, younger than probably most attorneys at big law firms, I was heavily involved in all of that stuff.
I love that. It's super cool just to hear like the fusion of entrepreneurship and working at a large company with $2 billion in revenue, which is just unbelievable. You mentioned how you're on Milbank's Global Executive Committee, which huge honor. Congratulations. Yeah. What I want to ask you is, like, how did your mindset shift from turning into a lawyer into more of a businessman? I know you were still a businessman from beforehand, and when you guys moved your team from Milbank, that was a business decision. But I think it seems to me that every year your job becomes less of just only law and more of law and business, the fusion of the both. So how does that, how do you characterize that?
So I'm smiling because one of the things that Milbank takes pride in is we have no non-working lawyers. And so it's a massive and incredible honor to be part of the executive committee. I had to run a campaign.
Really?
Yeah.
Within the company?
Within the company.
That's so interesting.
We ran a campaign. I talked to every partner in the firm and told them why I think I'd be good for the job. But Milbank is a working partnership. The chairman of the firm works. He's actually, as I told you, we delayed today's meeting because I had a work call.
It's a Sunday, by the way.
It's a Sunday. And the chairman of the firm is trying a case right now. He's
Really?
a litigator. And so he's like, we got to do our executive committee meetings on Sunday. Everybody at Milbank works. We don't have non-working lawyers. So the job on the management side has not, it's difficult, but it has not really taken away from the amount of time I need to spend on the actual practice of law. It's just been additive.
Right.
So again, a blessing and an honor, but it's not like I have to do the same amount of work as a lawyer as I now have to do as a manager.
Right. You don't just get to scale back.
No.
Magically.
It's not, you work 9 to 5 and now, 4 hours here and 4 hours there. It's now I have to work, 18 hours and it's right. Adding on. So, yeah. And
on that note, with a growing family, with trying to maintain some sort of work-life balance, I want to know what you think about that. To reiterate, it's a Sunday, and we were originally scheduled for something like 8 o'clock in the morning, and you had to push it off because you had some work calls, right?
Yeah.
So, tell me a little bit about that.
So the first thing I say when people talk about work-life balance is I don't like the phrase because the phrase suggests inequality, okay? When you look at a scale and you think balance, you think the two sides are equal. If you want to get ahead in any business, whether it's law or otherwise, there's no equality. You need to set priorities, and you need to grind, whatever it is, whether it's in finance, because I see the people who've been successful in finance, whether it's in wholesale, my friends that have been super successful in wholesale. You need to grind, and you need to work. And so there is no balance during a very important period of your time. And it's funny, when I interview kids to this day and they ask me about work-life balance at a big law firm, my immediate reaction is, okay, this is not the place for you.
Right.
But it's been challenging. I've crazy memories of sleeping in the office. It's easier now because you can work from home. But missing important times in my family life. But you have to make a decision at each place along the way. I think it's a little bit easier for me now as I've gotten more senior to be able to manage my time. But if you're going to be Shomer Shabbat, you're going to need to work virtually every Saturday night, particularly in the winter.
Right.
If you're going to take off the holidays, you need to be prepared in advance that your team can actually carry you through, and you better plug in as soon as the holiday's over. You need to be prepared to work on Sundays. You need to be able to work late at night. You have to. I don't know anybody that's really been super successful in anything that they've done without fully committing to it. Now, that doesn't mean you miss birthdays and you miss funerals and you miss bar mitzvahs and you miss weddings. But it does mean you need to set priorities. It does mean that you need to be available if big law is what you want, or if working on Wall Street at Goldman Sachs is what you want. There's not going to be a balance. You're going to have to commit to it. And a lot of people say, I will tell you, having interviewed a lot of kids for 10 years when I was at Allen Overy, I ran our recruiting program. Every kid coming in, every potential applicant coming in, will tell you that they're willing to do it, but they're not all willing to do it. And you see that and you know it. And the people that are super successful are the ones that are willing to put in that extra time to say, well, I could be done at 7 o'clock at night, but if I spend that extra hour, my work product will be, instead of a B, it'll be an A. And that extra time is really what makes the difference between somebody who's super successful and somebody who may just be successful.
I love that comment about balance not having to be, to the two sides inequality, but rather being able to focus on what's important to focus on now for the time being, right? Yeah. So I'm sure there have been points in your life where it was more important, or maybe small moments, or maybe a stretch of a couple of years where it was more important to focus on family life or community life. Yeah. But there have also been times where it's time to prioritize work, right? And I think, and I don't want to say that we're putting one over the other, but it's just they're able to exist in harmony without existing 50% for each, is like what I'm hearing from you.
That's completely true. And I think it's critically important that the team that you surround yourself with, when I say team, I'm primarily thinking about my wife and my wonderful wife. Because from a, my wife knew what the goal for us was, for our family was. And she sacrificed a lot. She had a graduate degree, and she didn't continue pursuing it. And when I slept in the office on one of our anniversaries, she understood. And when I told her, look, I remember, again, when it was harder to work from home, I need to go back into the office on Saturday night. She understood. And when 2 days after we got married, I didn't come home for 2 more days because we were going on our honeymoon a week later and I had to work. I'm not sure she understood. She probably said, I don't know what the hell I got myself into. But that kind of team commitment with my wife and sort of shared goal allowed me to really be able to do these things. If she was not on board, it was never going to happen.
Right. Do you ever feel like you're revving your engine but stuck in neutral? Maybe you're flooring it in the wrong direction, spinning your wheels, or worse, running on fumes with no clear road ahead. If that sounds at all familiar, it's time for a tune-up with Jeff Sitt. He's an amazing guy. He's an author, speaker, and coach who knows exactly how to help you shift gears, gain traction, and accelerate towards success without burning out. Too many professionals stay stuck in traffic, bogged down by stress, indecision, and bad habits. But with Jeff, you get a roadmap to clarity, confidence, and control. He helps you remove obstacles, hit the gas on what works, and stop stalling on your potential. And the best part is Jeff is offering a free 30-minute pivot and prosper strategy call designed to help you get aligned, gain clarity, and head in the right direction. No risk, no strings attached, no pressure. So if you're ready to turbocharge your life and finally get in the fast lane, book your call now at jeffsitt.com. Your next right turn starts today. Property insurance for residential and commercial real estate has been nothing short of a nightmare this year. Rates are up, coverage is down, and confusion is everywhere. That's exactly where the Eli Cohen Insurance Agency comes in. With deep industry expertise and a focus on high-value, complex portfolios, they know exactly how to cut through the noise. Eli and his team leverage strong carrier relationships to find coverage options and pricing you won't easily find elsewhere. Whether you're a property manager, investor, or owner, you need a trusted advisor who understands the landscape and who knows how to deliver results. Call Eli Cohen today at 718-336-1700 or email info@EliCohenAgency.com to explore smarter insurance solutions for your portfolio. You mentioned beforehand that if people are not willing to relinquish their old definition of work-life balance, then they might not be right for big law. Big law might not be the thing for them. What other characteristics or qualities of people show you that they are right or not right for big law?
So for me, what I tell people is, it's very clear. There's one very simple thing, because by the time you get into big law, you're probably smart enough, you're probably good enough, you've probably done great in school your whole life, you know how to work. The most significant factor is, do I care about my work product? Do I have pride in what I want to do? When I hand something into a client, when I hand somebody into my senior associate, is it crystal clear that I did my best and I care and I'm proud of the work product? And once you have that is everything to me. And I can very clearly tell when I've had associates who've worked for me who care and who don't. I've had people that are absolutely brilliant, think about law review at Harvard and Yale and you name it, but they don't care. That comes through, whereas you have an associate from a lesser law school, whatever that means, but it really, really cares about the work product. That just comes through it like crazy. So if you don't care about what you're doing and you're not willing to take pride in it and you're not willing to constantly learn and grow, and it may be because the work is not interesting to you, then you probably need to find a different area of the law or something else to do. That's the single biggest characteristic to me. And if you find that if you're on the other side of that, you find that you don't care and it's really difficult to care, and you're not going to care every hour of every day for 365 days a year. But as a general matter, if you're not caring, you don't have pride in your work product, you're not going to be good at what you're doing. And so maybe real estate law is not for you. Maybe aircraft finance is. Maybe bankruptcy is, or leverage finance, or M&A. Or maybe it's not the law. Maybe it's the millions of people who've used their law degree to take it into business. But that's it. That's so easy to see, and that's by far the key differentiator in any of the associates that have ever worked for me.
You've done interviewing for recruiting at law firms. You've done interviewing for the community at Columbia, and your many resumes have passed your desk in terms of young people, ambitious young people. So what else have you noticed in these ambitious young people and really A-plus players, standout achievers, whether it be in law, whether it be in any other field?
Yeah. The number one thing is be honest and show intellectual curiosity. I've been interviewing, like you said, for kids going into college, for law firms. Be prepared. Know who you're talking to. Know what they do. Know what law firm they work at. Don't accidentally slip the wrong law firm.
Like from ChatGPT. Listen, I'll blame the AI. We were talking before this about the AI revolution. It's not looking too good with what's happening here.
It'll get better. But for the kids I interview going into college, it's really seeing if they have an intellectual curiosity, an understanding of the world beyond the community, because to be successful in business and probably in life, you have to be able to at least see beyond the community, even if that's not what your future holds, and to be able to have an adult conversation about interesting topics. I don't expect any 17-year-old to have a deep understanding of any super sophisticated business concepts. But I do understand if they have an intellectual curiosity, if they show me that they have used that curiosity to chase down something. Do you read books? You know, that for a 17-year-old, if you're not reading books about anything, that's a tell for me. And then when you get to law school, and I'm interviewing at the law school level, it's a little bit different, but it's the same general categories. Do you have an intellectual curiosity? Have you shown me somewhere on your resume that you're willing to really put the time into something that you care about? We tend to look for, are you a team player? And that manifests itself in a million different ways. It could be in chesed, it could be by playing, in a college sports team. It could be anything. But we want to see team player, intellectual curiosity, willingness to work, and willingness to be effectively an adult in a business setting.
Nice. I love it. All things that young adults like myself should really internalize. There's a book that I read. It's called So Good They Can't Ignore You. It's by Cal Newport. And the author has a concept. The book is about helping people advance in terms of their careers. And he has a concept called career capital, which is basically the skills you learn and the business acumen you build up in order to put yourself ahead in any field. So like an example today might be learning how to code or learning, how to use AI effectively, for example, with the new landscape of technology. And what I want to ask for you is, having interviewed so many people, what are some of the biggest things that help people build up their career capital?
Okay, so I'm not sure if this exactly answers the question, but I will tell you what doesn't.
Okay, please.
One of the biggest mistakes I see young people in the workforce do is look ahead, right? So you're a second year at a law firm, and you're thinking about trying to act like a partner at a law firm. Or you come to a law firm and your whole plan is to go in-house and work at Goldman Sachs, Blackstone, you name it. And what those people fail to realize is that the greatest career capital you can build, the greatest opportunity you can build, is what's right in front of you. If you are not great at what you're doing as a second-year lawyer, if you're not all in for that and you're too busy looking ahead, you're going to miss everything. Because the greatest opportunities you're going to build, the greatest career capital you're going to build, is what's right in front of you. If you are the best second-year associate at a law firm, you will have the best opportunities to go in-house. You will have the best opportunities at career progression. You will have the best opportunities to go to another law firm, right? You will have the best opportunities to do whatever's out there. But the second that you're looking ahead and not worrying about the now, you're going to miss it all because you're not going to take advantage of what's in front of you.
Very interesting. I think it's a common mistake people make is looking, in 2 years and 3 years I'll be here and I'll be okay, right?
Yeah.
But if you're not doing great at what you're doing now, you'll never be there.
Look, if you can't be, you can't be a partner at a law firm after 2 years, right? It's just not going to happen. And you're not going to have the best opportunity to go work at one of these big financial institutions unless they think you're great and you actually have the experience. And how do you do that? You do it by being great on the deal you're working on so that they see you and they know who you are. So that when they're going to talk to their friends at wherever whatever their industry events are, they can say, oh, you're looking for a general counsel? This guy I worked at Milbank is fantastic. She's amazing. One of the things I'm most proud about at Milbank and prior to A&O is a lot of the people that have worked with me have gone on to become clients. We've been able to help place them at some of our clients. Or in some circumstances, they've met people that they, think about the biggest names, the Ares of private equity and Apollo and PIMCO, and people who've trained under me and worked with me are all kind of now spreading out into that world. And to me, that's among the most rewarding things that you can do. But they wouldn't have been able to do that if they were looking ahead.
Right.
If they were, actually, I'm thinking about the individual people. They were all really amazing and excellent associates who were very much focused on learning in the moment and being great in the moment. And that opened the doors for them to be able to go to these other places.
You've been through the housing crisis of 2008. You've been through 9/11, just in the start of your career. You've been through COVID.
Yeah.
And the current, volatility of the real estate market today. What I want to ask you is, what has been the biggest setback of your career?
So none of those were setbacks for us because we developed our expertise probably in 2008. as being the number one distressed real estate law firm or practice in the market.
So if I can revise my question, how did you turn what would have been a setback and what was a setback for most people into a revenue multiplier?
So 2006 happens. Kevin and I look at each other and go, we can be opportunistic here. We can go sell to our client base that we know how to do what we call loan to own. So loan to own for clients is when a client buys a loan with the idea that they're going to foreclose or exercise remedies and get ownership of the building. So we went out there and we marketed hard and we said, we are the best people to do this. If you have opportunistic capital, if you have the stomach to spend money in this market, we're going to help you make money. And we did, at the time, it was the biggest and largest mezzanine loan foreclosure in history. So I won't get into the details of what it means, but effectively, we helped the client buy a small piece of debt, a small piece of a loan on the John Hancock Tower, which is an IMBALANCE building in Boston, one of the biggest buildings in Boston. There were 3 or 4 other buildings, but that was the main one. There was one in California, one in New Jersey. And we said, we're going to figure out a way that you bought this loan at a massive discount, that you're going to own this building. And they said, there's no way you can do this. We said, we can do this. And me and Kevin were like, we can do this, right? Yeah, we can do this.
That's the business mindset.
That was the business mindset. And our client bought this tiny piece of debt, which we would call the fulcrum position, so it's the controlling piece of the debt, for $50 million. And I remember working with Kevin. I wrote a memo that was 7 pages long, and I said, this is exactly how you do it. And it was super complicated. Again, it was participations and mezz loans and mortgage loans and servicers and anything you could think about. There were condo regimes. It was a law school exam. And I said, Kevin, do you think, like, we wrote this up. Like, is this ever going to happen? He's like, there's no way. No way it happens the way you wrote it up. I said, okay, let's give it a try. And lo and behold, it went exactly to plan.
Really?
And our client was able to buy and then sell the John Hancock Tower, had their best recovery. They made, I don't know what's public, but they made many, many, many millions of dollars, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. And Kevin and I looked at each other and said, we just did this. We just steered this client through a remarkably rocky situation, opportunistic situation, and now we can do it. And from there, that was probably the deal that made our name in the market. We went on to do a ton of more of these loan-to-own plays, which was super fun. So we saw 2008. We saw distress in the commercial real estate market, and we said, how do we turn this around?
And on the same note of turning potential setbacks into opportunities, what has been the biggest mistake that you've made in your career?
I don't think there was any big grand mistakes. I could think about little mistakes I've made along the way that I try and learn from, whether it's how to manage people on my own team. I think early on I learned that you need to motivate people that you're working with. Everybody's different, right? Some people you can use a soft, nurturing hand. Some people you can use, some people react more to a harsh tone. So I think developing that skill was trial and error, and I'm certainly not perfect at it, and it's evolving, and it's necessary to learn also the personalities of the people that work for you to be able to work on that skill. But that's something I've definitely developed over time, and I did not have right necessarily in the beginning.
Right.
I don't know. Sometimes, notwithstanding what I said before, sometimes I kind of wish I made more time for myself. And when I say myself, I mean myself and my family. At certain points in my career, this one's tough, but I think when my grandfather died, I remember he was sick and I couldn't get the deal for the weekend. And I remember being in the car going back to work on Saturday night when getting the call, and I missed seeing him before he passed away. So there were mistakes like that where you think about those sorts of things. It's not easy.
Yeah. I mean, hindsight is 20/20 for sure. And in the moment, it's very difficult to make the right decision. And it's also, looking back, hard to say that your life or your career would have been the same if you made different decisions. So, not making anything in terms of justifying it or anything like that, right? But it's so difficult. Like, again, the balance doesn't have to be 50-50, but the balance, you know what I mean?
That's exactly right.
Right. Should people follow their passion?
No.
Not at
That's
all.
a silly thing to say. If I followed my passion, I'd be unemployed and homeless somewhere. Do what you're good at, right? Like there's a lot of things I loved growing up. I mean, like basketball was one of them. In law school, I played basketball 6 days a week. That's how much I loved it. That was my exercise. That was what I did in between classes and work. But the joke they say is 13 years old is the age where most Jewish boys learn that they're more likely to own a basketball team than to play in the NBA. I think you should do what you're good at. I think, and if you're lucky enough where your passion is also something that you're good at, then yes. But I'm more of a realist. I'm more of a pragmatist. I really enjoy my job. I love my job. But I have other passions. I love to play tennis. If I followed a career in tennis, where would I be now? I probably wouldn't be doing this podcast.
Right.
So, I don't. No, I don't think you should follow your passion. But if you're one of those lucky people where you are truly excellent at what it is that your passion is, then you're blessed.
It's funny because the book that I mentioned previously, So Good They Can't Ignore You, I'll link it in the description. And it also talks about actually, should you follow your passion? And the answer is a resounding no in the book. And like what it talks about is that whatever career you go into, as long as you don't hate it from the onset, and even maybe if you do hate it, but you learn to love it, you learn to love the business. Doesn't matter if you weren't attracted to it or gravitating towards it from the onset, right? And I think that's so important, is that you might not have gone to looked at law as the thing that you love the most in the world, but building out your business at the multiple firms that you were at, and growing your team, and working on larger and more complex deals. I mean, I'm sure you learned to love the business more and more.
Yeah, look, for me, there are definitely things I love about my practice. That feeling in your stomach when you're able to get this crazy deal, right, on day one. We had a crazy complicated data center finance pitch we did for somebody actually on Friday. And it gets your juices flowing because I knew it was a competitive situation with another law firm, and that was fun. That was a lot of fun. When you close a deal, right? When the deal's closing and this $3.9 billion deal, and it's the end of months and months of work, and everybody's like over the moon. You're excited. You're great. And there are a lot of times in between when, as I mentioned, we do a lot of work in the distressed real estate area. When you get that, nasty gram from somebody, or you have to write that nasty gram, there's a little bit of adrenaline that rushes through you.
Right.
But there are plenty of periods where it's, oh my God, I have to read through 150 pages, or this is annoying and this is boring. But there's a ton of situations where it's not that way. And you find them in the job. And for me now, in the management role at the law firm, you kind of have those same moments too. You have very challenging decisions you need to make, whether it's hiring a partner, asking a partner to leave, how a law firm reacts to international political events, strategic decisions. Do we open a new office or do we not? And you can get some really cool moments out of that too, where you kind of feel like you're really a part of it. And so you love that. So you can find your passion at different places within what you're doing. But I mean, I don't know any little kid who's 8 years old who says, I really want to close a public to private takedown of a office REIT. But they want to play at the U.S. Open, or
Right.
be the shortstop for the New York Yankees, right? Or be Mike, whatever the equivalent of Michael Jackson is nowadays. But very few people get to do that. So
Right.
so follow your passion. No, but maybe find the passion in what you're really good at.
Love it. You mentioned a complex deal that was, negotiations were taking place, or you were trying to fight for the client on a Friday. And I want to talk about that a little bit. Law is a 24/7 industry.
Yep.
I would even say 25/8. You know,
Yes.
like it never stops, and especially with international players and on weekends, nights. I mean, you name it. How has keeping Shabbat and unplugging on that weekly day of rest, especially when no one else is unplugging with you, like what does that mean to you?
Everybody I think who works at Big Law has that first decision to make. And I remember I lived in the city and I was working on a deal in December and I was in a partner's office and I said, I need to leave. It was probably 4:00 and Shabbat was at 4:12. And they said, I made hand motions because we were on a conference call. And I said, no, I have to leave. And I left and I walked home. I walked out of the office at 4:10, and I was where I lived in the city. I was able to walk home, and I set that boundary on day one. I know other people who were not able to set that boundary on day one, and they're regretting it to this day because it's much harder to step back from it. I also happen to be super lucky to be in the New York real estate world, and in the New York real estate world, there's no shortage of people who don't work on Shabbat. It's difficult, but I often tell people who are Shomer Shabbat that work with me is, you're giving up that 25 hours. You better be online if needed on Saturday night. You better make sure that you make yourself available on Sunday because you need to make up for the people that are covering for you. And it's not even that. It's the 3-day holidays are crazy. And look, again, I'm lucky where I have a lot of the same clients that I've been working with for years and years and years, and they now know and they understand. And a lot of them will tell me, Erwin, Shabbat's at 4:12. Get off the phone, I've had actually on that deal, the Columbia Properties deal. The person I was working opposite at another law firm, who's representing the lender, was also Shomer Shabbat. And I remember he was. At the same time, we were negotiating a deal. His name is Aaron. Aaron said to me, "Is that your wife yelling that you need to get off the phone?" I said, "Is that your wife yelling you need to get off the phone?" It's. I think the most important thing is to set that boundary on day one, and you'll be amazed. But we're blessed to live in the New York area. You will be amazed in New York at the amount of people that have an absolute amount of respect for that. And I will tell you that every single person, Jewish or not, now looks at me and says, "I wish I can do that." The non-Jewish people who I work with say, "You are so blessed that you do this." And so Hashem works in mysterious ways, and it's been easy since I set it up early. But I also go out of my way to overcompensate for the people that support me when I'm not working.
And on that note, Hashem works in mysterious ways. How has faith guided you in business throughout your career?
I think it's really challenging to be successful without a firm grounding in family and in community. And I think religion creates a super effective scaffolding for that. And if you could have your grounding in, again, family and community, right? And Judaism does that in spades, and Orthodox and modern Orthodox Judaism does that in spades. You're always having Friday night meal. On all the holidays, you're with your family, whether you're in Deal, whether you're in Brooklyn or Florida, wherever you are. It creates life cycle events more often than most other religions, and it provides a real moral and ethical grounding for what you're doing. So I think it's hard for me to imagine being where I am without having that scaffolding. But the other side of it is there are other, for other people, like I mentioned, Kevin or others, you have to have a scaffolding. Orthodox Judaism is a very, for us, we're very lucky to have it because the scaffoldings, you don't need to go search for it. It's here. You grew up with it.
It's really not difficult for us.
It's not difficult. You're blessed to grow up with it.
Love it. I love the mindset. I want to shift gears a bit towards community involvement.
Yeah.
I mean, like you have a powerful career, and your work seems to consume a lot of your time. Why get involved in the community in giving back?
It's rewarding. You give back to something that gave to you. My version of giving back has been like I said, to interview community kids for college, to, I think I pretty much take every call that community kids have about law firms, law schools. I've been able to connect some of them and talk to them. So, I was very, along my career, I had a lot of influential people that helped me. Some of them for a year or two, some of them for longer, not all of them from our community. Actually, most of them not from our community. But I really enjoy watching kids in our community grow, spread their wings. One of the reasons I started with the Columbia Alumni Network to interview kids was I wanted to see our community. I wanted the kids to go to, now I know this is a little bit of a different world post October 7th, but I wanted community kids to be a part of Columbia and Princeton and Yale and these amazing institutions where they can meet and interact with in what I still think is a very relatively safe setting, just the future leaders of the world. I was, the people I met at Columbia, I'm still very close with many of them. Just amazing, incredible people. The opportunity to kind of live outside the community for a little bit, even when I went to Penn Law, Philadelphia, a little bit farther away. Even though I had a comfortable chevra of people in both places, it was life-changing for me and it was important for me that other kids in the community had access to what I had access to. And there were a bunch of people. I remember when I was a summer associate at Proskauer Rose, there's a guy by the name of Myron Rommeld who lived in Deal. I think his kids went to Hillel. Myron Rommeld was a partner of Proskauer, and I didn't really know him. But on Fridays when he used to come back from work, he used to say, "Why don't you take the train with me back to Deal?" And he didn't have to do that. I'm sure he had plenty to do. And I would sit next to him on the train, and he would mark up his documents, and I would pick his brain on all sorts of things. And a little bit of that I wanted to pay forward. He probably has no recollection of this, but a little bit of that I wanted to pay forward. So when, a community kid who's at Penn calls me up and says, "Hey, can you give me advice?" Or "How should I think about this? This is what I want to do." Or, "Hey, should I go to Fordham or Cardozo?" Or, "What do you think about Brooklyn Law School?" Or, "I've had the opportunity to, I'm at XYZ Law School. These are the 7 firms I'm thinking about. What do you think?" Or even I've been lucky enough to be able to put resumes from community kids in front of partners at Milbank, and there have been community members who've worked at Milbank or will work at Milbank, and that I really love, because I love to see these kids within our community growing, beyond the community and having an impact outside of it and being exposed to more than just what you see on East 3rd and Avenue T.
Right, and what I love is that, a small act of kindness from somebody who offered to take, to let you take the train with him back when you were younger, really, it caused a ripple effect. And nowadays, you're paying it forward largely in part because of, because he helped you, which I think is just amazing. And it goes to show you that, you paying it forward to community guys like me, 18-year-olds, for example, people in their 20s, in their early stages of their career, will pay it forward because you paid it forward for them. I love that, I think it's beautiful.
Yeah. Look, it's not just community people, there have been people along the way. I remember when I was at Simpson, there was a senior associate who, talked me through many late nights. He's not a community member, but, is now one of the preeminent lawyers in New York, and he didn't need to do that. Obviously, Kevin, I mentioned, who was probably the most influential career-wise in my life. There are people who take the time and invest in you, and so the little bit I can do on that front, hopefully that pays dividends.
Amazing. And what I could see from your story is that networking really, I think, is the factor that above all, obviously your work ethic and what you're willing to do, you're willing to put in the time, but networking, put you forward so much in terms of the people that you met and the people that have met you, that have gone on to work with you. How do you advise young adults to network effectively?
I think talking to as many people as you can. I'm not opposed to a broad outreach to people, and so I think for young people, I think that's critically important. when I was young, I was always nervous about approaching people because I didn't think I had anything to offer. And then you realize, it comes back around. You will have something to offer, or you do have something to offer. I think be bold, ask people for their time. You may get shut down, but that's okay. But you also need to look beyond the obvious. So, like I said, some of my closest friends at Columbia are a ton. One of my closest friends from Columbia, actually, ironically, he grew up in Boston. And he got into the branding business, which is remarkably funny because he didn't know what a Syrian was until he met me in college.
Right.
And now all he does is work with Syrians. And he says to me, well, now you're working at some big fancy white shoe law firm. And, so, you never know where the connections are.
Right.
And so meet interesting people. You will become a more interesting person. And it's fun. It's fun to get to know people. It's fun to talk to people.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, this is it. You're
This
doing
is what
it.
we're doing it right now, which is great. I love ask and you shall receive,
Yeah.
and even if you don't receive, then like if you ask 10 times and you receive once, you're still you still
ahead.
come out you still come out ahead.
You're ahead.
Right. I think it's amazing. Like in every area of my life, asking has like really played such a big role. If asking somebody for something if you're curious, to asking for a job or for a referral from someone. I mean, it can really make a big difference.
Take somebody out to lunch, ask them their story. It's it's amazing. There's a guy I work with who's now at a big private equity fund, and everybody loves this guy. And I kind of was like, why does everybody love him? And I realized the reason everybody loves him, Alex is his name, is because when you talk to Alex, all he does is ask you about you. And so you'll sit down with him and you'll think you have the best conversation, and he will want to know everything about you, from where you were born, what you did, you name it. And then you'll walk away going, I love Alex. But then you walk away and you realize, I don't know anything about Alex.
Right.
And it's just an incredible quality to have. People are drawn to it. People like to talk about themselves. And they like to be asked questions, and it makes people feel special. And one of Alex's amazing qualities is everybody who knows him loves him and thinks that he's their closest friend. And that's only because all he does is ask. He's curious. He wants to know about you.
Amazing.
It's an amazing quality.
Have you read How to Win Friends and Influence People?
Not really. That's not on my reading list.
So it's a great one. And one of the classics in terms of networking and meeting people. A lot of people are deceived by the title, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It sounds weird. It sounds like you can only read it if you want to make friends. But it's a great book. And one of the main principles is just asking people about themselves. I like to recall a specific passage from the book. The author says that he had a conversation or a lunch meeting with somebody, and really all he did was ask them about them, like Alex, right? And he heard later on that the person was talking about him. The person said, oh my gosh, Dale is such a great conversationalist.
Yeah.
He's so interesting. Meanwhile, he didn't say one word about himself. Just letting people speak about themselves, which we all love doing, is it makes people love you, just like Alex.
Is a great story, a great anecdote from a book I just read. So there's a comedian, Michael Costa. I don't know if you know who he is.
Not familiar.
Okay, so I think he's on The Daily Show. He used to be a professional tennis player. He's on TV. You'll see him. He just wrote a book. He said one of the things his mother used to do was they had a tennis ball in the house. And every time the tennis ball came to you, you had to ask somebody a question and hand it to the next person.
Sure.
And so you learn at a very young age that you're constantly asking about somebody else. And when you have the tennis ball, you have to ask another question to pass it along. And that kind of helped him. It helped him develop his comedy and all this other stuff. But it was an incredibly important skill, so that when somebody asks you a question, you must give it back.
That's great.
You must kind of keep it. It was interesting. Yeah.
Love that. I love that. That's just the mindset of asking. I know you're a big reader and you're a big fan of young adults reading. What's on your reading list? What are some of your top reads that you would recommend to people who are ambitious, who want to be successful? Doesn't have to be a business or a law book. It could be a fiction book that that instills you with some principles.
So I try and read every Saturday. But the things that I like are Jewish books, but sort of sophisticated things about ethics, and I love Rambam. I read a lot about Rambam, and I like to read history. And I think for me, the history stuff is critically important. There's a book by John Meacham that's really excellent, which talks about, I'm trying to remember when I read it, probably a couple months ago now, but it talks about how, we think about this political moment and how it's, unique and has never happened before. But Meacham's book kind of talks about, actually, this stuff has happened a ton in American history.
History repeats itself.
It doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes.
Right.
And so I think the history stuff is important because it gives context to the moment we're living in. It kind of has the ability to take the edge off a little bit of the hyperbole, but it gives you the ability to kind of keep things in perspective, but not just keep in perspective, but see what are the potential paths to solution and the angles and how things have played out and how you can think about things. And I love history, so I read a lot about that. And then I do read a lot about religion. I think most recently I just read an essay by Chaim Soloveitchik about how modern orthodoxy has changed. I read about the Bible as a historical book versus not a historical book, and how do we square some of the factual inconsistencies. And I like that because it helps me think. Sometimes I bring the two together. Right now I'm in a famous book by Birmingham who talks about the great Jewish families in New York, and the Goldens and the Saxes and the Seligmans and Loeb and Kuhns, which I just think is an amazing story
Sounds
about.
Cool.
It's an amazing story about basically how this German Jewish cohort that probably immigrated between the 1830s and the 1860s all became. I mean, it was the Lehman Brothers, it was Goldman's, it was the Saxes, it was every name that you know.
What's this called?
It's called Our Crowd by Stephen Birmingham. Okay. He also wrote an amazing book called The Grandees, which is about the Sephardic elite, so the Spanish and Portuguese elite in the early, Cardozos and those sorts of people in the early 1900s, which is really cool stuff.
Sounds super interesting.
Yeah. So when it comes to books, I read a lot, but I just think reading makes you more interesting.
Doesn't matter what.
It doesn't matter what. It makes you more interesting. It makes you kind of able to. It helps with the conversations, and you got to read something that keeps you interested.
Right. I think I've always been a reader. Credit to my parents for that. I think there have been points in my life where I tried to read things for the sake of getting, ingesting the knowledge.
Yeah.
I usually find it difficult because if I'm reading on a Shabbat or on, right before I'm going to bed, I really want to be hooked. And, I just started reading on the subway, which is it's great. It's a great use of the time. But the reason I haven't done it, for the past couple months that I've been commuting was because I've been reading books that aren't interesting to me, right? So if the book is compelling and bringing you back, then I think you're doing the right thing. And no matter what you're reading, I love that point, you can read anything.
Yeah, let me. So I don't take the subway anymore. I drive because of where my office is. I can't take the subway, but podcasts can serve the same function,
right?
So whether I'm listening to a commercial real estate podcast, whether I'm listening to Judaism Demystified, whether I'm listening to a comedy podcast or a sports content, about the Giants draft, keep yourself interested. Keep the brain moving about whatever it is that interests you, and books do that. On Saturday, again, we have such a blessing on Saturday because if you're Shomer Shabbat and you're not using your phone, and we got to a certain point where my youngest kid is now 9, they don't need me as much. You have more time to read, and again, Shabbat creates that scaffolding for you to be able to do these things that you can't do anymore with the phone and with the TV and with all these other things.
Right. Looking back on your journey from Penn Law to multi-billion-dollar transactions in real estate law, what has been your momentum moment, the moment that things really started to take off for you?
It was probably when I left Simpson to go join Kevin. So when you come out of law school, I remember back then, so it was 2001, my salary is $125,000. I never thought I would make that much money in my life. But you're still a kid. You're growing, was not married, was living in the city, and you're trying to get through, and everything's new and everything's exciting. I think in 2006, by the time I moved, I was married. I had my first child. And I remember thinking, okay, now I have this new opportunity. Now I got to go. Not that I wasn't serious and I didn't care at Simpson. I did. I cared very deeply about what I was doing. But now there was like this new start, this new beginning, this fresh start. And like I said, I had a wife, I had a beautiful daughter, and now is the time. And I remember at that moment, I started on Chol HaMoed. I started in between. And I said, at this moment, this is where I'm going to give it everything. This is where I will have no regrets. This is where I will work as long as I need to work with the balance that I'm willing to succeed and be successful. I think that was probably the moment.
And was it difficult for you to take that leap, newly married, growing family, to take that leap, that entrepreneurial leap?
Yeah, I think back to that actual decision. And I don't know why I made the decision to this day. I'm sure people will tell you, well, I had this pros list and this cons list, and I did all this mathematical. It felt right. If I tell you it felt right, I knew I was done at Simpson. I didn't know where I wanted to go, but it felt right. It felt like the right place for me.
That's important, to trust your gut.
So it's hard to say exactly what motivated me and what that entrepreneurial feel was, but it was, again, to bring it back to faith, but that decision was probably, for my career, the single most important decision I made.
To wrap up, Erwin Dweck, thank you so much. It's so interesting to hear about your story. You wouldn't think that working for a big law firm would allow you to be entrepreneurial and to be a businessman, but you've clearly proved those people, the people who think that wrong. You proved that notion wrong, and so inspiring, so interesting to hear about you. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. This has been a blast. Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening until the end. I really hope you enjoyed this conversation. I know I did. Here are my top 3 takeaways from my conversation with Erwin. First, you can be entrepreneurial in a large corporate company. Erwin didn't just take a job and climb the ladder. Rather, he built his own brand within the firms that he worked at. He brought on his own clients, and he even helped lead a team-wide move to a brand new firm. Erwin proves that even inside a giant institution, there's room to build, to grow, to take risks, which is super interesting to me as an entrepreneurial guy who wants to get into investment banking. So I've been thinking about that since our conversation. Second, don't chase work-life balance. Chase priorities. What I mean by that is, Erwin made it clear during the episode that balance doesn't mean equal time. It means knowing what matters most in each session of your life and being all in on that. Whether it's grinding for a promotion or showing up for your family, the key is to be intentional and to surround yourself with people who support your priorities. And third, be excellent at what's in front of you. This one really stuck with me. Erwin sees so many young professionals trying to play the long game, chasing the next job, the next promotion, without mastering the one that they're currently in. But the truth is, the best opportunities come when people recognize that you're great at what you do right now. Focus on that, and everything else will follow. If you enjoyed this episode, guys, check out my conversation with Gita Kaplan. Gita shares her incredible journey from sleeping on the floor in the office while pregnant during her big law years to now serving on the Ocean Township City Council, working as general counsel at a major apparel company, and volunteering on 2 nonprofit boards. It was an unbelievable conversation. To listen to that episode, just search Momentum Gita Kaplan, that's Gitta Kaplan on any platform, or click the link in the show notes. And with that said, guys, thank you so much for watching, for listening, wherever you might be watching, whether it's on video, on Spotify, or YouTube, listening on Apple Podcasts, watching on Instagram. Thank you so much, and be sure to subscribe. We have so many great episodes coming up. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time. Thank you again to Jeff Sitt and the Eli Cohen Insurance Agency for sponsoring this episode of Momentum.